Welcome to Zip Code, and today we are looking at another cup of code. We'll be handling RabbitMQ integration in Spring Boot application. So we want to see how we can achieve publishing data into a queue in RabbitMQ and having a consumer that will consume it on the other end. So essentially, this architecture is contributes very perfectly to the microservices architecture. So it implements that segregation of responsibility and allows us to have our integration loosely coupled and also an event sort of driven design where we can get one event published into the queue and a consumer, which would be another API or microservice or a third-party application, can then consume on the other end without directly depending on our microservice or our API being up or down or things like that. So it gives us that flexibility and scalability in terms of our design and the freedom to give different teams different responsibilities, and they can be sort of narrow, fine-tuned into delivering the best microservice or integration architecture that they can. So let's look into what we have. So we're going to start by the design behind RabbitMQ and how that looks like. So on one end we have a data publisher, which is going to be a microservice or a system that would run a process to publish data into a queue. So we basically publish into a broker. So RabbitMQ has a broker, which is an exchange, and that exchange essentially facilitates the posting of the message into the correct queue or to the correct address that is specified in that queue. So when a microservice or a system publishes data, it only publishes to the exchange, which is the broker. Then according to the bindings that exist, according to the addresses that were defined in those in the exchange, then it's able to map the data into the correct queue with the right address, and we call that you have routing keys that you can use to map to the queue, and you have other attributes that you can set and rules that you can define. But for now, we're just going to limit this to routing key so that it's easier to understand. So a broker will have a binding. That binding will point to a queue and a routing key, and that will then specify how the message should be dealt with. So you have different queue types or different broker type or exchange types. Sorry about that. So you have different exchange types. You have topic, you have direct, and you have fan out, and essentially those will then define how your queue is handled in that sense. So once the data is in the queue, it's available for subscribers or consumers that can then pull the data and then translate it or transact with that data based on what is in the payload, and then they can basically save into a database or run a different process and basically continues that journey according to that. So a perfect example would be if you order online. So you'll have you will order online this site. Let's say you order maybe online clothes, you buy clothes online, so they will then publish that order into a broker exchange. That broker exchange will be pushed into a queue, and that queue can then be consumed by the clothing store consumer, and that clothing store consumer will know that, oh, there is a new order that needs to do 1, 2, 3, and basically they can then update that order to say it's being processed and things like that. And once that is ready, you can basically then proceed with with the order journey until it is shipped back to you. And when that is shipped, it will basically follow the same cycle, but then now there will be a service to send back the tracking into order in place, and basically go to a exchange that will say the order is shipped, and then let's say this queue will have that shipped order, and that consumer will be the order microservice, then to receive that update and basically send you a notification, an email, an SMS, and things like that. So that type of architecture is sort of loosely coupled and allows the flexibility within the system design entirely. So that's basically about the exchange. And now let's move into RabbitMQ and our code. So first things first, we're going to start with Spring Initialzr as always. So spring.io, that's where we go. So we have a project, Maven project, Java's language, and we're going to specify this to combat zip code. And we're going to have a Rabbit, let's say microservice, we're going to call it that. And basically it's how it looks like. We're going to package it as a war, and we have a version 17 over there. So when I add a few dependencies here, we will add, let's say, web, so that we can scaffold a REST controller here and test that. And then we're gonna have DevTools just to live reload, and then we're gonna have Lombok to allow us to scaffold some of our pojos. And what we are going to need is Spring RabbitMQ. That is what we are going to need. So this is basically what we will need to basically scaffold our project, and depending on whatever more you would need on the project, you'd add according to that. So I'll share this configuration in the description down below. And then now we can move into code. I do have this, I already scaffolded this, so we'll go through that quickly. And now what I want to share also, just a quick note, I do have a RabbitMQ set up on Windows operating system. So how you can set up RabbitMQ on your local machine and start testing RabbitMQ on your side. So please do check that out on the website zipcode.com, and you will find that very helpful, and you can proceed. So yeah, that's what we have. And now let's jump into let's see how RabbitMQ looks like before we proceed with our code. So RabbitMQ, let's just do that. Oh, this is localhost. So basically once you've installed RabbitMQ and everything runs fine, you will get this login screen. Then you can just log in as a guest, which is default, and then you can configure and add users as you want. So this should be fine. Okay, so let's see, should essentially give me let's just go to overview. So the landing page will be the overview page, as you can see here. So now that I have the page up, I can just go to exchanges, and I will show you. So this exchange is a zipcode RabbitMQ exchange, which I've already created, and it's a type of topic. And this exchange, if you go to this exchange, has a binding to a zipcode subscriber queue, and it has a routing key of subscriber routing key. So as we defined this side, we have our broker exchange, and our broker exchange has a binding to a zipcode subscriber queue, and it has a routing key to say use the routing key to send the message to this particular queue, and then when we consume it, we'll consume that particular queue and the data that we expect to have over there. So that's basically how this will look like. And then you also have the capability to just go to the queues, and you will see that this is a queue, and the queue, so these features has like it denotes what features you've enabled for the queue, or attributes that you've enabled for the queue. So if you look at the add queue here, we have a D here, which means our queue is durable. So the durability that we have here is durable. And then we also have a dead letter exchange. So if some of our messages do not publish to this or processed correctly, then they would go to a dead letter exchange and handled in that flow. So basically that's what we have for this queue particularly. So that's about it with the queues. Let's start working with our code. Let's go to Postman. So this is how our request and payload is going to look like. So we have subscribe, and let's say send this, and it should basically give us a 200. We got a 200, and when we check our logs, we see that the published data subscriber and the consuming queue data ID is that one, which is this ID here, and the name is subscriber over there as well. So that looks good. So it means we published the message and we were able to consume that particular message. So now let's see the code in action. Finally. Let's go to IntelliJ. First things first, we're going to start by on our applications to Java or main class to Java. So we're going to have an annotation enable Rabbit. So this is very important, enable Rabbit. So once you have generated a project from your Initialzr here, you can just pull it into your IntelliJ, and basically gives you a project. And then you just add this annotation, enable Rabbit, and once that is there, we basically starting with our configuration. First things, we will go to application.properties or application.yaml. So in there, we want to set these particular configurations for our server and our RabbitMQ credentials. We have our server starting on 8080, just like that, and we have our application name, Rabbit microservice. Then we have our RabbitMQ properties, so connecting to localhost 9090. And if you check that in our Docker, I am basically mapping the default ports of RabbitMQ default ports. I'm mapping them to my local machine port because this is a Docker container. So I'm mapping them to these particular ports of my choosing. You can also choose yours. You can point it to 8080, points to 15671. So Docker will give you this option to map these ports as you prefer, and it should basically expose all of these ports so that you're able to connect to RabbitMQ using the AMQP protocol. So this is what I've exposed on my site. So yeah, that's about it. And then we have the username, password, which is the default, guest, and then template retry. Template retry, we want to say enable true, interval is 2 seconds. Then we have the AMQP deserialization, trust all, we say true, but we shouldn't be needing this because we'll be using a string to send and receive the data. So there's no serialization really that needs to be trusted here, unless you're using custom serialization like your Jackson, which is basically your JSON serializer. But yeah, that's basically about that. And then we have custom properties here, which is just what we want to define for our queue. So queue exchange is the exchange that I just showed you on RabbitMQ, and we have the queue name, which is the same as the one that I have on RabbitMQ. Then we have the routing key, subs routing key. So we have that. So these are all the configs that we need. Then now we want to run our configuration. So in our configuration, we have, obviously we will annotate this at configuration class, and we have we're pulling these values from the properties file. So get the queue name, get the exchange name, get the routing key, and get the port. That's basically what we are looking for. But here you can get as much as you want, and you can just ignore the other properties. Like now we'll create a few beans. First, we want to create a queue. So this bean will have our queue, which is clearly defined, and it should know that there's a bean with a queue, and there's a bean of type queue. Yes, and that bean handles our RabbitMQ queue. Yes. So we have arguments that we want to set to the queue. So those arguments are the same as what we set when we're creating the queue. Let me show you. When you're creating the queue here, these are the arguments that we want, and ours happens to have a dead letter exchange, which is the argument that we are setting here. The dead letter exchange is that particular dead letter queue. That's basically that, and then we just return a new queue, and our queue is durable, which is the feature that we have here, durable, and you can see that it's also here. So it's durable and exclusive false and auto delete false, and then we pass in the arguments over there. Then we'll receive a new queue. If you do not have these arguments, you can essentially just get rid of this, and you can get rid of that as well. So it should basically, if you don't have any arguments that you want to specify, you can have it like this, and it should still be fine. So that will work best as well. So the next thing that we have now is now that we have a queue, we need an exchange for our queue so that a broker can handle the push or the publish to that specific queue. So now we're going to define a bean of a type exchange, and that exchange will be a topic exchange because our exchange here is of type topic. So that's what we want, and we want to give it the exchange name that we've got from our properties, and is durable, true, and auto delete, and then we want to build that particular exchange. So also here, as you build the exchange, you can specify different attributes for your exchange, and according to your specific requirements, and it should be fine. But this is just basic setup that we can use for now. And then the last config that we need to add is now binding the exchange into a queue so that it can be able to map and route messages to the correct queue. We're gonna declare, we're gonna have a bean of type declarables, which is the bindings that we have, and then we're gonna have a topic exchange and a queue that will inject, and basically we just create a new declarables and the binding builder. We bind to the queue that we have, and we bind to the exchange that we have, or to the correct exchange that we want it to be in, and then we're using the routing key that we have for that particular queue or that particular binding. And basically we have set up the connection to our queue and our exchange. And as you can see here, there is no definition of like connection factory or AMQP template, just because I'm using defaults, and you will see where I use the AMQ template shortly. And also the payload serializer, deserializer, I'm also using the default, which is a string for now. So that's basically why we don't have those here. So let's see how the publisher is going to look like. So now everything else is ready. We want to do a publish. So we have a publisher service right here, and this is annotated with add service, and we auto wire the AMQ admin. So this is basically going to be injected, and we're going to use just the default, and we're going to have an AMQ template, which again is going to be a default. We're not specifying any custom configurations, but if we were to add any specific configuration, we would then plug that into a queue config and define what we want in the AMQ template. And then the other thing that we have is basically the properties that we need: queue name, exchange, and routing key. And then we have our publish. Finally, we get to the publish. So the publish takes in a subscriber DTO, and the subscriber DTO basically looks like this. There's ID, name, and channel, and that basically is then has the access modifiers accordingly. So that DTO is what we want to publish to our topic. And once we get the data, we basically pass it through a object mapper because we want to send it through as a string. So then we define a string payload, and then we do a payload mapper. So it's a mapper, right, value a string, then it will take our data and convert into a string. Then we can basically use the template to AMQ template.convert and send. And then we give it the exchange name that we want and the routing key and basically the payload. Then the exchange will handle routing it to the correct queue. We don't need to specify the queue name. So the exchange name and routing key should be enough to publish the message into the correct queue. So this is basically what we have, and that's basically looking good. And we have different options here. We can convert and send and receive, so that it publishes the message and still gives us the message back. And we have different message send methods that are available to us. We have object message, message processor, or just the message void, which just does the send and nothing else. And we have routing key and object message, and the one that we're using is the string exchange and string routing key object. And so you see that there's various options that you can use here to send the message to your queue. So this is what we recommend, because we know the exchange that we're going to and we know the routing key that we're going to. And then the exchange will just handle pointing to the right queue and we are fine. So this is what we need. So now how do we call this guy? And then so to get the data into our queue, we have a so now that we have our queue send, we have a controller that then takes the subscriber DTO. So that controller is what we have here. So we have a REST controller which has a request mapping subscribe, and that controller basically has a dependency injection of publish service, and that publisher service we only do a publish and nothing else. So now we have our post mapping here, and that post mapping is basically returns a response entity, and it takes in a request body of subscriber DTO, and we just print out the publish data DTO.getName, and then we just do a publish on that particular DTO, and we send a 200 OK once we are done. So this is what we have on our Postman. We have our data here, and we have the subscribe as a post. So if I change this, let's say to that, and then I say please subscribe, and then here channel, let's just say add zip code, then we send this, and we go to the logs. Let's go to the logs, and you will see publish data, please subscribe, and consuming queue data. This is the ID that we have, and this is the name that we have. So now you can see that we are sending that data to the queue via that. So basically we are done with the publishing of the actual message into our queue. So the next thing that is there now to do is consuming the message. Consuming the message can be a different microservice, but we just put it into one project so that it's easier to explain and quick to go through. So let's go to the queue, the consumer. So the consumer basically looks like this. It's the same if you want to put it in a different project, it's the same configs that you want to set up, the same dependencies that you want to add on your initializer right here. But the only thing is it will just have a consumer service like this. So it adds service class that will then have a Rabbit listener, and you specify the queues that you are listening to, and process the message accordingly. So we receive our message as a string because we sent it as a string, and then we basically have an object mapper, and we read the value into our subscriber DTO, and then we just print out consuming data, ID, and name, just like that. And basically that's about consuming the data that we have. And finally, we are done with our publishing and consuming the data from one end into the other end of the entire journey that we have over here. So we're able to publish the data to our exchange broker, and the exchange broker takes care of publishing the message into the queue, and we have a consumer on the other end that receives the data and processes it accordingly. So as you can see, on the consumer, we are not calling any function in here, we're not calling anything, we're just saying get the data from the queue that we have, and basically translate that into a Java object that we know of, and then handle it over here. You can run a business process, throw into a database, send it to another system, and things like that. But we're just doing a printout, and that's basically it. So we've seen the entire architecture and design, and I hope this was helpful to you. Hope you do. Please subscribe and like, share, comment, and all of these links I'll share in the description down below. Until next time, cheers.